Hey everyone, I'm Megyn Kelly. Welcome to the Megyn Kelly Show. There are efforts underway right now to avoid an all-out regional war in the Middle East, with President Biden heading to Tel Aviv. We are hearing he will meet with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and then travel to Jordan for a sit-down with the Jordanian, Egyptian, and Palestinian leaders. One of the big issues right now, what to do with the refugees from Gaza. Jordan's King Abdullah just warning that he will not be accepting the refugees. They will not be coming into Jordan. They will not be going into Egypt, he added, saying a flat out no to that idea today. What about us? AOC's got a very different view. This issue has sparked a fierce debate right here at home. My first guest is at the center of that storm. He says America cannot accept people from Gaza. And obviously on the opposite side of AOC, but is he on the opposite side of some of the other Republican presidential candidates? Joining me now, 2024 Republican presidential candidate and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Hey, subscribe to the show on YouTube and follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Millions of Americans earn and use credit card rewards. A few big box retailers want to take those rewards away. That's according to the Electronics Payments Coalition, a sponsor of today's episode. Rewards you may use on groceries and school supplies, cash back to save on gas and grow small businesses, and travel miles to make memories. All those travel miles, everybody loves getting their travel miles. Well, the so-called Credit Card Competition Act would eliminate those credit card rewards. No more travel miles, no more cash back. Visit handsoffmyrewards.com to learn more. And if you want to help them, tell your legislator to stand up to the retail giants and to support consumers and small businesses. Governor DeSantis, welcome back to the show. Good to have you. And so you took the position yesterday that it's a no on Gaza refugees coming into the United States. Nikki Haley then went on CNN and reacted to your comments. Let me kick it off with what she said to Jake Tapper yesterday in SOT 1.
You know, I dealt with this every day for 2 years. And, you know, what I can tell you is you have to realize that whether we're talking about Gazans and Palestinians, you know, all of them don't, you've got half of them at the time that I was there didn't want to be under Hamas's rule. They didn't want to have terrorists overseeing them. They knew that they were living a terrible life because of Hamas. You had the other half that supported Hamas and wanted to be a part of that. We see that with Iran too. The Iranian people don't want to be under that Iranian regime. They don't. We saw what happened to Masa Amini. We saw how they treat them. There are so many of these people who want to be free from this terrorist rule. They want to be free from all of that. And America's always been sympathetic to the fact that you can separate civilians from terrorists. And that's what we have to do.
What do you make of it, Governor?
That's just bizarre. I mean, first of all, I said over the weekend, no Gaza refugees. They should go to the Arab nations. Most of the other GOP candidates have now followed suit. I think that's good. Here's the thing. Hamas has support in Gaza. They were initially elected. People in the streets in Gaza were cheering the attacks. They have created a culture there where they teach the kids to hate Jews. The textbooks don't have Israel even on the map. And so these are things that are celebrated. So it's really a toxic culture. It's not a question of whether everyone is a member of Hamas or a terrorist or not. The question is, do you want to be importing those pathologies from the Middle East into our country? And what Nikki Haley is suggesting is somehow you can choose, okay, you're Hamas, you don't come to America, and yet these other people that are not, they're really just freedom lovers. And I learned a lesson serving in Iraq, Megyn, because remember, the Iraq campaign started for WMD, but then when that was elusive, the mission kind of changed to, quote, democracy in the Middle East. And the argument was made by a lot of American policymakers that if you just got rid of these tyrannical regimes, people would be able to seek freedom and have democratic governments, and then there wouldn't be a market for terrorism. Well, what you found out when you were on the ground there for probably 48 hours is their conception of freedom was a lot different than our conception of freedom. On the ground in Iraq, the typical Sunni Arab or Shia Muslim, they believe freedom meant a government that subscribed to Sharia law or Islamic rule. So it's just a fundamentally different culture, and it's not our role to be trying to import that into the United States. So Nikki Haley's just wrong about that. And quite frankly, it's dangerous. I mean, one of the things in the aftermath of this, Megyn, that's been chilling for me to watch is before the blood was even dry on these innocent Israelis who were massacred, you had people in our own country taking to the streets, demonstrating in favor of Hamas and what they did. That's a sickness in our society, and I don't think we want to expand that by importing people who would share those views.
We reached out to the Haley campaign today. She also spoke to Fox News, and she gave us the following statement saying, Nikki Haley opposes taking in Gazans. She thinks Hamas supporting countries like Iran, Qatar, and Turkey should take any refugees. And she went on from there. So now she's trying to make clear that she opposes taking in Gazans. We went back and said, does that apply to Palestinians in general, too, not just those who live in Gaza? And she said, yes. She's now trying to clarify that she opposes taking refugees.
But Megyn, I mean, yeah, that's great. And I'm glad she's flipped. But why would you even have the discussion about vetting people and saying you can separate one from the other unless you were saying we would import them? Why would we be vetting people if they're just going to go take up shop in Egypt? We'd have no role in that. So clearly that's what she was indicating. She got a lot of blowback from it because it's an untenable position. And so now she's changed. And I think that's welcome. But I do think it shows an instinct on her behalf to, one, try to cater to elite opinion, because my view of no refugees from Gaza, that's supported by probably massive percentage of Americans, probably not that popular in elite circles. And I think she tries to cater to that. But then the other thing is, I do think she's still suffering under the illusions, which should have been wiped away after dealing with Iraq and Afghanistan, that somehow people in that part of the world just yearn to live in American-style democracy and freedom. That is not what they're after. The average person in Gaza that's been taught to hate Jews, their view is they don't necessarily want their own state. What they seek is the destruction of the Jewish state. And that is not limited to Hamas. That is a widespread, deeply embedded belief amongst Palestinian Arabs in the Gaza Strip.
We've also had a debate here internally and externally about the Americans who are supporting this terrorist group, Hamas. It's been stunning to watch college professor after college professor, not to mention student groups. Students for Justice in Palestine is generally what they call themselves, but they're all different kinds of Arab supporting groups taking to the streets now in support of Hamas against Israel. These are Americans who are throwing their support behind Hamas in the wake of this absolute atrocity that we've seen, these terrorist acts committed against Israelis. There was a debate that unfolded over the weekend when Vivek Ramaswamy tweeted out, these folks should not be blacklisted. You've seen some CEOs come out and say, we're not hiring them. If you're going to sign this letter and you're going to say you support Hamas and not Israel, we're not hiring you. Vivek came out and saw it differently and said, I'm quoting here, it's not productive for companies to blacklist kids for being members of student groups that make dumb political statements on campus. Colleges are spaces for students to experiment with ideas, and sometimes kids join clubs that endorse boneheadedly wrong ideas, saying he opposes cancel culture, whether it's from the left or the right, calling this cancel culture. What do you make of it?
Megyn, it's not cancel culture to say that somebody's celebrating the beheading of infants, the execution of elderly, some of the most barbaric actions that we've seen in our lifetime. If you look at what they did, what the Hamas terrorists did, as bad as Al-Qaeda and ISIS and some of their worst moments, I think this has reached an even new low from there. So the idea that you would go out and celebrate that as a good thing, that is absolutely the type of person that you should not want to hire. I would not hire any of those people who were doing that. And it raises a larger issue. What the hell is going on in American universities nowadays? This would not have happened during World War II when the Japanese attacked us. You did not see student groups going out there and celebrating that. And yet here, because remember, Americans were massacred too. It wasn't just Israelis, and Americans are still being held hostage as well as Israelis. To be able to go out and do that, it's a sickness in these institutions. And I think it's a reason why 20 to 30 years ago, if someone came to a job with they graduated from Harvard, oh, wow, that's great. Now you see that resume. To me, I run the other way. I mean, I'm assuming that there's a lot of problems embedded into whatever has been fed into that student because of how toxic the culture has gotten on our universities. What I will say is this, though. Any of those students who are here on visas, those visas should be canceled and they should be repatriated back to their home country. That's a no-brainer. Why would we want to welcome people into this country who are totally hostile to basic American decency and values?
Well, that's a very interesting prospect. I mean, that's closer to, ideological beliefs can get you deported. That's what Trump has been saying. And I get it. I mean, these people have no desire to assimilate to the United States values at all. None whatsoever. They want to come over here and call for jihad or support terrorism against Israelis. How are they ever going to align with us? But of course, it will be considered controversial, right, to cancel visas based on ideological differences.
Well, of course it's controversial, but here's the thing, Megyn. It used to be, if you had shown up at Ellis Island in 1900 and you were saying that you supported Islamic jihad, for example, which they probably weren't thinking in those terms at that time. Although, our country did fight the Barbary pirates under Jefferson. So they had experience dealing with terrorism from the beginning with the founders, but that probably wouldn't have been necessary. You would have been turned away from Ellis Island. If you came and you rejected the basic foundational principles of America, you would have been rejected from coming into this country. That would have been non-negotiable. So, when I'm president, we are going to ensure that nobody is admitted legally to this country who doesn't believe in the basic values of America. We have robust debates in this country. There's no question. You could have different views on tax policy, immigration policy, all this stuff. It makes it robust. It makes it a great country. But if you are just somebody who rejects basic Western values, basic conception of freedom, then that's not something that's good. And we can learn a lesson from what Europe has done over the last 10 or 20 years. They did mass immigration from parts of the world that rejected their values. And what happened is those people, because they were coming in such big numbers, they didn't assimilate into those societies so much as they've now tried to change those societies to mimic the societies they had left. That's not how America's always been. It's always been people come and they assimilate into our way of life. That is something that's been kind of frowned on by our elites in recent years, but it's just simply unsustainable for a country that's based on this founding creed to continue being a strong country, if we're importing large numbers of people that reject the basic conception of America.
You have Trump out yesterday, it was Monday in Iowa, making the following point about when he was president. Take a listen.
Under my leadership, the world's thugs and villains and killers and savages were in retreat and running scared. They were running scared. All because you had a president who stood up for America. We took a lot of heat for heinous attacks on Israel this month would never have happened if I was your president. Zero chance of that happening. But most importantly, we will keep the radical Islamic terrorists the hell out of our country.
Does he have a fair point? I mean, were we better off, safer with him as president?
Well, I think if you look at what Biden's done, there's no question we're in a decline in terms of U.S. prestige abroad, economic strength at home, rule of law deteriorating. It's really, really bad. So in that sense, of course, it is true, though. They were firing rockets from Gaza during Trump's presidency. There was conflict. This is an attack on a different level, no question. But that was still happening. There were still problems in the world. I think with Biden, I think he's made unique errors by one, thinking that he can have a rapprochement with the Iranians. This $6 billion was an outrage, and I said it at the time in August when it was first announced, but they've done tens of billions into Iran's coffers through relaxing the sanctions on the energy. That has been the mother's milk of Middle East terrorism in the last few years, and Iran has been using that to fund, of course, Hezbollah and Hamas. And Biden, to this day, they still think they can have a rapprochement with Iran. They haven't done anything to really turn the screws on them. My fear on this trip that he's making in there is he wants basically behind the scenes to have Israel take their foot off the gas, not go whole hog against Hamas, because he wants to be able to preserve the ability to play footsie with the Iranians. So they've just been wrong on almost everything, and America's paying the price. But I do think what we need going forward, I think we need strong leadership. I think we need drama-free leadership. I think we need somebody that's going to get in there and focus on the country's issues, isn't going to be distracted with any of personal issues, isn't going to be distracted with all these other things that ultimately, aren't going to turn the country around. So I'll be a very focused and disciplined president. There'll definitely be a new regime when I get there, and there'll be a lot of changes that we'll make from the Biden presidency.
You are taking some control, what control you can take as a governor of part of this situation, trying to get Americans who are in Israel back home. And are you also trying to get Israelis out? Because I understand you've sent planes now over to Israel, and you're getting people out who need to get out, who want to get out, people with families, people with children. You and your wife and your children were there to visit and greet some of them in some moving tape that we've seen. And I wonder exactly who are you helping get out of Israel? And you, unlike the federal government, are doing it on your dime and not charging these people in the middle of a war to get on the plane. So explain what you've been doing and who you're helping and why.
Yeah, so we have a lot of Floridians that are over in Israel. We've got great synergy between our state and that country. So we knew there'd be people that wanted to get back, many hundreds, maybe even more than 1,000. And they were not getting any luck with the State Department or with the embassy. So I did an executive order last week activating Florida emergency response to be able to bring planes in there and take people back home. So we had the first plane of 271 on Sunday night. The thing about that, Megyn, is there were 91 children. I had mothers that were stranded with 3 or 4 kids. I had one family with 10 kids that they were trying to get back to Florida. Now, we didn't limit it to just Floridians, because if there's people that are struggling to get to Georgia or New York or whatever, we're all Americans and we want to help people. But it is limited to Americans. I'll tell you this, though. You can come across the southern border and the federal government will fly you all across the country free of charge. They'll put you up in nice hotels at taxpayer expense. They're not charging the illegal aliens, yet they're going to charge people fleeing a war zone and then dump them in Greece. They're not even bringing them back to the United States. So we have more flights coming. Next one will be tomorrow morning. We are taking people from Israel, but we're also going to stop in Athens, Greece, to pick up people that the federal government may have stranded. And so we anticipate many hundreds more that we'll be able to rescue over the next couple days, and we're happy to do it. I'll tell you, you knew people needed to get out, but then when we greeted people and they were telling stories, it really brought it home. I mean, I had one mother point to her 6-year-old daughter, and my wife and I have a 6-year-old as well. And she said that her daughter was saying, "Mommy, I don't want to hear rockets anymore. I don't want the rockets. I just want Florida. We got to get back to Florida." So they were really, really excited to be back. And when there's a void of leadership, you got to step up and make a difference. So we were able to do that, and we're proud to have played an important role.
Good for you. How involved should we be getting in this conflict? Because people are worried. Americans, even those who support Israel strongly, are worried about a possible ground war, God forbid, U.S. troops getting a request to go in and help if this breaks out into regional war. We're already fighting a proxy war with Russia in Ukraine. I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot to ask of the American people, both from their coffers and from our blood and treasure in our military. And so even though I know you're pro-Israel and I'm pro-Israel too, there is some concern about just how involved the U.S. should get in this conflict. How do you see it?
Well, one of the things that I've appreciated about the U.S.-Israel relationship and our support for them is they've never asked us to assume responsibilities that they should be assuming for themselves. They work very hard to have a strong and capable military. Support we've given them over the years, whether it's Iron Dome or some of these other programs, that has supplemented what they're doing for themselves. So they are not going to ask us to displace that. In all of Israel's conflicts for 75 years, U.S. ground troops have not been a part of that. There's no basis to do that for us. I don't think that that's really where we're going to show support. I think where we show support is primarily the moral clarity to say Israel has a right to defend itself, and they have a right to eliminate Hamas. I mean, I have all these people out there. They're trying to magnify Israel as the problem. They're attacking Israel. They're not calling for Hamas to release the hostages. They're not calling for Hamas to have an unconditional surrender. If you're worried about the civilian casualties that Hamas is trying to inflict by using them as human shields, you should be calling for Hamas to make an unconditional surrender and to release the hostages. People aren't doing that. So they're going to need us. And I don't think Biden's going to do this over the long haul. But America should stand with them and say they have the right to not only defend themselves, but to end this problem with Hamas once and for all. There's going to be a lot of pressure from the UN, all these other places, to tell Israel to back off. But they can't live like this, where they could have so many of their people massacred in cold blood. So I think that's the main thing. Not U.S. troops, but that strong support. And we'll continue with the military relationship that we have, intelligence, the types of small amounts of aid, relatively speaking, when you think about it. The other thing I think we can do that could be helpful is turn on the full panoply of sanctions against Iran, particularly with respect to energy, to deprive the Iranian regime of the sustenance they need to continue funding these terror groups. I mean, the fact of the matter is, if Biden had just come in and taken a hard line against the Iranians, who knows whether this operation would have even been able to have happened without the amount of money that Iran has pumped into that area over the last 2.5 years. So I think those are two really important things. But ultimately, this is not something that's going to be an American ground war. We, of course, do have interest in recovering the hostages that are American citizens. And I'm sure that the Biden administration does have people on the ground. We've got some people that are wired for that can do that. But ultimately, it's Israel's war. We should support them, but it's not something we should get enmeshed in with our own ground troops.
Last question, domestic politics. Something big is unfolding today in the House, where you used to work for a time as a member of the House of Representatives. And they're trying to find a new House Speaker. And at last count, late last night, it didn't look like Jim Jordan, who's the candidate now for the Republicans, was going to have enough support. But, what did it take Kevin McCarthy? 15 votes in order for him to finally get the support. Do you support Jim Jordan for Speaker? And what do you make of this whole mess we've seen in the House?
Yes, I think that the Republicans should vote for Jim on the floor. I think he would do a good job. He'd be the most conservative speaker that we've had maybe ever, but certainly in many, many years. And I think he's more reflective of the voter base that we as Republicans have. And one of the things that we've seen for, a decade or more is that the D.C. Republican political class doesn't reflect the views and the aspirations of the voters that put them there. It's like they campaign on all the right things, then they go up there, and then they go native, and they kind of have a different agenda. And I think that's why you've had a lot of dissatisfaction over the years. So hopefully they'll do that. But from my vantage point down here in Florida, what I'm seeing is there's just a lot of chaos. There's a lot of palace intrigue. There's a lot of drama, but there hasn't been very much results. And ultimately, as a leader, you're judged by the results that you produce. In Florida, we don't do political empty calories. We don't do any of the palace intrigue or drama. It's just execution. Because as a leader, I'm going to be judged by the results that I do. So, we talk about spending. They haven't done anything on that. We have big surpluses in Florida. We've paid down almost 25% of our debt. You talk about foreign threats. We've banned the purchase of land by the Chinese Communist Party. We've leaned in on illegal immigration by banning sanctuary cities. On and on down the line, we've produced real results. And I think that's why Florida has gone from a state that had typically been viewed as a toss-up state to now a Republican state, and one that's really leading all 50 states on so many different issues. So I just hope that they realize, you're not up there to get clicks. You're not up there to send fundraising emails. Ultimately, what you're there to do is deliver results. People are paying way too much for groceries. Interest rates have made home purchases unaffordable for millions of Americans. We have an open border, which not only is killing people with fentanyl, it's created a huge risk of terrorist attacks in our own country. We have crime in the inner cities. We've got problems with the education system and the disrespect that parents are feeling. So these are things people want to see action on. So my hope is they'll elect Jim, and then they'll get to work on all those issues. Because if we're producing results on those things, the public is going to have a positive response. If they're running around like chickens with their head cut off, then it gives the Democrats the ability to say that, maybe our results aren't great, but at least we can show up and run things, appropriately in terms of having a speaker or whatnot. Why would we want to give them that satisfaction to be able to use that to beat us over the head with? So get your act together, get behind JJ, and let's try to move forward. And look, take notes for what we've done in Florida. I mean, we've shown how to do it. We now have super majorities in the legislature, Megyn, but I didn't have that when I came in. And we worked, we got things done, and people responded positively, and they've entrusted us with more members and more authority to do even more stuff.
Well, you also picked a big fight with Disney, and they recently signaled they're going to move away from all the woke nonsense. So thumbs up on that, though we'll see whether they mean it. I've got my doubts. I'm sure you do too.
First of all, I don't like them getting involved in our politics, and we fought back appropriately. But if they cut the woke out, they will do better as a company.
Yes.
They're going in this tangent has hurt their stock price. Families don't trust them anymore, where it used to be when I was growing up in Florida. Disney was the gold standard for family entertainment. We just want our kids to be kids. And I, speaking as a parent of a 6'5" and a 3-year-old, we want our kids to be kids. We don't want an agenda. Let adults fight these issues out, but get back to what made you great. And if they do that, I do think that they will be in much better shape. I wonder, though, whether the culture in Burbank is such that they can ever really get back on track. We will see, but I think that people have voted with their wallets, because I think a lot of parents have been dissatisfied with some of the stuff that they've been putting out. And not just on our bill, all the programming, I think a lot of parents have said, nah, not my cup of tea.
Yeah. No, you're so right. When we were growing up, you'd hear that na 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 na, and it kind of gave you the warm feeling. You knew it was going to be wholesome family entertainment, something sweet about a dog and a life lesson, and not somebody trying to trans your kid. It's really gone in a different direction.
I don't think anyone in our generation ever saw a Disney cast member at a theme park, a man wearing a dress. I mean, we just never saw that kind of stuff. And now they're doing it. And it's just inappropriate. But I do think it's been counterproductive for their own company. So hopefully that they get on a better track. Ultimately, though, for me, I'm going to fight woke agenda, whether it's in the legislature, corporate America, wherever it is, because I think it's corrosive to the country. Anytime these institutions become corrupted by this agenda, they end up performing poorly and they lose legitimacy. We've seen that with colleges. We've seen that with bureaucracies. We've seen that in district attorneys' offices, where they let the criminals run free in places like Chicago and Philadelphia. So it's had a huge impact on our society in a negative way. I think the tide is turning in our favor on it, but we got a lot of work to do to be able to leave the woke agenda in the dustbin of history where it belongs.
Governor DeSantis, all the best to you. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.